What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Martian MMA podcast. I'm your host, and my name is John. We are back with episode 54 for the 8th week in a row. And this week we are going to be analyzing and predicting the UFC Nashville card going down this weekend, headlined by Stephen Wonderboy Thompson versus Anthony Showtime Pettis. Towards the end of the program, we will be recapping the UFC London card that went down this past weekend, along with discussing some general MMA stories from throughout the week. But with that being said, we're going to start things off in Nashville, Tennessee, with our 12-fight card starting at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. The entire card will be broadcast on ESPN Plus, just like the past couple cards have been. It's been nice, you don't have to change stations, change platforms, go from your computer to your TV to whatever streaming process you use. You can just keep on the same stream the entire event, so that's a real luxury I've been enjoying with ESPN Plus lately. And, the UFC is bringing a solid 12-fight card to Nashville. I actually went to a UFC card in Nashville a few years ago, Glover Teixeira versus Ovince St. Preux. That card actually stunk compared to this one. This one's a pretty good card. We have a kind of an unorthodox matchup in the main event with Pettis and Thompson, and then there's a bunch of other solid matchups in the card as well. So we're going to get right into breaking those fights down right now. Kicking things off in the flyweight division, we have Eric Shelton, who is 12-5, taking on Jordan Espinosa, who is 13-5. The opening betting line for this one was Eric Shelton at -152, Espinosa at +110. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook 5dimes.ubc, Eric Shelton -170 and Espinosa +150. So a little bit more action coming in Eric Shelton's way. I definitely do not disagree with that. Eric Shelton has the much more UFC experience. Espinosa is actually making his UFC debut in this one. He does have 2 fights on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, and I don't think the octagon jitters will be too much of a problem for him. We talk about octagon jitters a lot, but Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, you're in an arena with 50 to 100 people, with Dana White there, with the cameras there. It's a very intimate, weird setting that you're fighting in. So I honestly think that environment might be even a little more hostile than the UFC at sometimes. But getting down to the matchup in this one, Eric Shelton, he's a pretty good grappler. He's looking to get this fight to the floor. He has good level changes, and his striking is nothing too special. He can counterpunch from time to time, but he's really looking to get this fight on the floor. He's a small guy for the weight class, even though this is 125 and most guys are small. He just seems very like a skinny, lanky guy. Just doesn't really have a lot of strength behind him, honestly. But he still gets the fights down to the canvas a lot of the time. But he does it a little recklessly. He sometimes is a little too desperate for the takedown and kind of sticks his neck out there. And you saw that in his most recent fight against Joseph Morales. Joseph Morales was attacking that guillotine the entire fight. Whenever Eric Shelton was blasting a double leg, Morales would threaten with a guillotine for a few seconds. It didn't look too tight. Shelton did a good job defending all of them. But you definitely don't want to be sticking your neck out there, giving people that opportunity. And his opponent, Jordan Espinosa's got a pretty nice Darce choke. That's how he finished one of his opponents on the Tuesday Night Contender Series. But Espinosa's got pretty good takedown defense as well. You watched that same fight where he got the Darce choke. He defended a takedown very well in that fight. Showed a really good balance. Looked like his opponent was about to complete the takedown, but Espinosa stayed on his feet. So look for his takedown defense to be on point in this one. And I think I would give the striking edge a little bit to Espinosa. He's got some pretty nice kicks. He's got some power in his right hand, but he gets hit a lot. His defense is not good, and his opponent Durto on the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series was tagging him with left hands all throughout their fight. Not really too much power behind any of those shots, and it didn't look like he was rocked too badly, but Espinosa's defense is definitely not perfect. So I think even the lesser striker in this matchup, Shelton, could possibly cause some problems for him on the feet. So I think that Espinosa's got some good takedown defense. I think he's got the better striking in this matchup, but I just think that Shelton is constantly involved in close fights, a lot of split decisions. And he constantly, I wouldn't say comes out on top, but he has very close outings in all those fights. So it's going to be hard to pick the debutant in Espinosa in this one. It's a really close fight, and honestly, where the line is now, I don't think I would lay chalk on Shelton. I think the value might even be on Espinosa, but I don't think there's much value on either guy. I think this one's just a pass, and but it's nice to see that the flyweight division is keeping fights around. So if I have to pick, I will go with Shelton in this one to get it done by decision. Next fight in the bantamweight division, we have Chris Gutierrez, who is 12-3-1, taking on Ryan McDonald, who is 10-0. The betting line for this one is Gutierrez opened as the plus 125 underdog to McDonald at minus 165. We have since seen a line flip to Gutierrez, now minus 235 to McDonald at plus 195 over on our affiliate sportsbook 5dimes.eu. So I don't know if this was a line error on best fight odds. That does happen from time to time, but Gutierrez opening as an underdog was just insane. I mean, I could understand it. McDonald is an undefeated guy coming into the UFC. Gutierrez made his UFC debut and lost in his most recent fight against Raoni Barcelos. No real shame in that loss, though. He came into that fight on short notice against a well-proven guy in the UFC, and held his own in there for a little bit. I think he actually even hurt Barcelos on the feet at one point, but. Gutierrez, he's got his takedown defense is not very good. He's not very active off his back, except for he does throw elbows from the bottom. That's one good thing. Barcelos was able to take him down and hold him down, but good to see that Gutierrez was attacking with those elbows off his back, and he can threaten a sub from time to time, throw up an armbar off his back, but in terms of getting back to his feet or scrambling out of positions, he doesn't really seem too gifted in that aspect. But his opponent McDonald, man, looks very, very sloppy. Everything about him looks sloppy. His grappling and his striking, his defense and his chin is horrible. You see. He's fought some low-level regional opponents, and he's gotten absolutely rocked in those fights where he's almost gotten knocked out clean. I believe it was the Matt Murphy fight where he was just dropped with punches like over, I think, twice in that fight, which was it's just insane to see that he's facing low-level guys with 7-9 records and he's getting dropped in those fights. So. And they weren't hard punches. They were coming from a mile away, and McDonald was still dropped by them. So even though we haven't seen Gutierrez really show off his power too much in the UFC, I definitely think he's going to test the chin to McDonald in this one, possibly even knock him out. McDonald's grappling is not going to be good enough to go for he can hit takedowns, but he's sloppy with his top control. He can't really finish subs too well. He had a lot of trouble finishing his lower level opponents on the regional scene, so I definitely don't think he'll finish Gutierrez. But I think Gutierrez will be throwing that oblique kick, or he throws a lot of oblique kicks. You saw that in his LFA fight. He has a very nice win in LFA. Over the gentleman's name is Mario Israel. Somehow a split decision in that one, but I thought he won that fight pretty comfortably. And I think wherever this fight goes, Gutierrez will be the better fighter, and I would, anybody who got in on his action so far, congratulations to you. And it's honestly even like a good parlay piece to throw in at minus 235 right now. So the pick is going to be Gutierrez to get this one done inside the distance. Next fight is taking place in the women's strawweight division. We have Randa Marcos, who is 8-6-1, taking on Angela Hill, who is 8-5. The opening betting line for this one is Angela Hill, the minus 130 favorite, to Randa Marcos as the minus 110 underdog right now over on our affiliated sportsbook 5dimes.eu. We see Angela Hill minus 150 to Randa Marcos at plus 130. So more action coming in Angela Hill's way, and I agree with that. I think this is a very favorable matchup for Angela Hill. I think that Randa Marcos fights the same fight in almost every one of her opponents. It's the same game plan. She tries to get those takedowns. She looks bad on the feet. She maybe has some success in round one, gets her opponent to the floor once or twice. Doesn't really do much damage. Doesn't really go for submissions. Just maybe kind of stalls on top or stalls against the cage. Maybe wins round one, but then usually drops rounds 2 and 3. Man, I think, like I said, this is just a cookie cutter outcome for all of Randa Marcos' fights. They all go very similar. She's on ever since she's gotten the UFC back in 2015, she's gone, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, win. She's got some decent victories in there. Carla Esparza, Aisling Bailey, Juliana Lima, but, she's never really impressed me with anything at all. She did have a pretty hard-fought draw with Marina Rodriguez in her last fight. But Angela Hill is a much more polished opponent than Marina Rodriguez. That was Rodriguez's debut, and I thought she looked pretty good in that fight. And, arguably won that fight. I didn't really see a 10-8 for any rounds for Marcos in that one. So, Angela Hill's takedown defense has been getting better and better. She's fought a lot of wrestlers over her career, and she's been forced to, learn the hard way sometimes, or by getting taken down, spending some time on her back, losing fights, and then going back in the gym and getting better with her takedown defense. So, her last fight against Courtney Casey was a split decision loss. That was a terrible scorecard in my opinion. I thought Angela Hill won that fight pretty clearly. She outstruck Courtney Casey in that one very handedly. But Angela Hill's got, great kickboxing, honestly. She's good in the clinch. She, throws elbows and knees. She's got really high output. And I just, I'm a big fan of the girl, honestly. I like Angela Hill a lot, and she always has exciting fights, and it's refreshing. Like I said, she's fighting an opponent who's gonna try to take her down and stall her against the cage and just make the most boring fight possible. And Angela Hill is gonna look to box her face off and kick her legs, kick her in the face. So it's pretty clear that you cheer for Hill in this one. I don't know. Maybe you see that some weaknesses in Hill's grappling that I don't see, and think that Marcos is going to be able to get the takedowns and wins round 1 and 2. But Marcos is really bad in the clinch. If she's not able to get her takedowns off a single leg or double leg or something like that, she usually goes for some bullshit head and arm throw, or just ends up getting stalled out in the clinch and losing the round there. So I can't stress enough just how unimpressive Marcos has been throughout her entire UFC career. And, Hill's been thrown in there with some stiff competition. She's held her own, and she's, come out with some nice victories. But this would be a big one for Hill, and I think that her takedown defense will stand up, or will be able to stuff the takedowns of Marcos, and I think that she'll punish Marcos in the feet, possibly even getting a late finish on Marcos. Like I said, Hill's got really good output. She's accurate. She lands a lot of different strikes, knees, elbows, punches, kicks. So if Marcos is not able to get her takedowns going, I can see that damage accumulating up, and Hill maybe getting a finish in rounds 2 or 3. It's not likely. It's very likely this fight goes to decision. It's like -400 that it goes to the decision, I think. But I honestly think that we could see a Hill late finish. So maybe I'll look for some props. I'll probably get some good odds on that one. So with that being said, we're going to move on to the next fight, which is taking place in the women's flyweight division. We have Alexis Davis, who is 19-8, taking on Jennifer Maia, who is 15-5. The opening betting line for this one was Alexis Davis, the -230 favorite, to Jennifer Maia at +170. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.eu, we see Alexis Davis -140 to Jennifer Maia at +120. So both of these women are pretty similar to one another. They are both jiu-jitsu black belts. They're both, quite sloppy, unathletic. Neither of their striking are very good. So this one could be a bit of a slop fest, honestly. So I just give the edge to Alexis Davis in this one because she's very opportunistic with her grappling. Even though she was taken down by Liz Carmouche recently, she was able to, threaten with a submission off her back, or, go for a sweep. So, both of these women, have great jiu-jitsu, like I said, both black belts, but neither of their takedown defenses are very good, so this fight is likely to end up on the floor, and they're both so sloppy on the feet that I think it's, just destined to end up on the floor. So it'll be interesting. That's definitely where they're going to be evenly. I think they're evenly matched on the feet, too, as well. They're equally, bad strikers. Maia's got, a decent right hand for her, and Alexis Davis is good at catching kicks. That's really the only note I have about both of these women striking. I think Maia, she got stuck on her back in which fight was it that I watched her, where she was taken down, and she didn't have much threat off her back, which is the opposite of her opponent Alexis Davis, who's always threatening off her back. Same opponent, Liz Carmouche. So while Liz Carmouche was able to take Maia down and hold her down, Carmouche was able to take Davis down, but not able to hold her down. So that common opponent, I mean, they fought within the same year. That common opponent is going to be a huge factor in this matchup. So the way that Davis was able to handle Carmouche was, much more impressive than the way that Maya was able to handle her. Not going totally by MMA math, but I just think that Davis would be the better grappler on here. I think that if she gets on top, she'll she'll stay on top. If Maya gets on top, I think that Davis will sweep or reverse position or possibly even submit her off her back. So this one should be contested mostly on the ground, and I just give the slight edge to Alexis Davis. She's more proven in the UFC, been in the UFC for 5 or 6 years, I'd say, or 4 or 5 years maybe, and then Maya's only had one fight in the UFC and hasn't looked too good so far. So I understand that people who got in early on Maya at plus 170, but where the odds are now, I'd say it's probably favored to pass. So the next fight is in the bantamweight division. We have Marlon Vera, who is 14-5-1, taking on Frankie Saenz, who is 12-2. The opening betting line for this one was Marlon Vera at minus 245 to Frankie Saenz at plus 175. Since then, over on 5dimes.eu, we are seeing Marlon Vera minus 160, Frank Saenz at plus 140. So line margins tightening up. Where the initial line was set was a little too high for Vera, in my opinion. This fight was actually rescheduled. I think it was supposed to take place on the 235 card on March 2nd, maybe 3 weeks ago, but I think it had to be rescheduled. I think Marlon Vera was sick the week of the fight and just couldn't properly weight cut. So that's interesting. These guys thought they were about to fight each other 3 or 4 weeks ago. Then they have a huge adrenaline dump, and they have to, go back to training for a few weeks. They might have, gotten a little out of shape the week after the fight. So it's interesting to see how these two gentlemen will perform after they got their most recent fight canceled. So especially Vera, considering that he was the one who pulled out due to illness. So I hope that he's, recovered to 100% before this matchup. But getting down to how this one's going to play out, Marlon Vera is a notorious slow starter. He loses the first round to almost every opponent he faces, and guys who are not very good. Look at his two most recent fights, Luigi Buren and Guido Canetti. He had both second round finishes for him, but he lost the first round to both of those gentlemen. So he's it's interesting. He just doesn't seem to start fast ever. He needs his coach to slap him around a little bit before he starts the fight. But he's tough though. He can absorb a lot of shots and he'll keep fighting. He's hard to finish. He's never been finished in his career. So it's gonna be. I don't see Frankie Saenz finishing him either. Even though Vera's probably his biggest weakness would be his defense on the feet, man. He just gets hit too much, Douglas De Silva de Andrade was, he's not the highest level striker. He throws a lot of single shots. He's not the highest output, and he's not the most technical either. But he was able to easily outstrike Marlon Vera over the course of 3 rounds, just tagging him up, giving him hematomas, and cutting him open. And Andrade won that fight comfortably. Almost a pure striking affair in that one. So, Andrade was, went for a few takedowns towards the end of the round, but Vera has always, lost his to the fights to the better strikers, Lineker and Andrade, like I mentioned, but. It's he doesn't get out grappled that often. He has very good jiu-jitsu. He's got decent takedown defense, and he's hard to completely out grapple. But he's facing Frankie Saenz here, who's I'd say one of the best grapplers in the bantamweight division. His takedowns are relentless, man. This guy is notorious for going for 10, 15, 20 takedown attempts a fight, and usually hitting a high percentage of them. Now it doesn't usually mean that he's going to win the fight completely, because we saw him fight Merab Dvalishvili, and I believe he lost that fight after getting 11 takedowns in that. Actually, maybe that was the other way around. Maybe Merab got 11 takedowns and Frankie Saenz won. Who knows? I guess I have a distorted perception of that fight, but Frankie Saenz is his boxing is pretty decent too. He's like I said, he's trying to close the distance. He's trying to make this fight a grinding type of fight where he takes you down, and he doesn't take top position in too much into play. He likes just taking you down, maybe hitting a few ground and pound shots, and then letting you get back up, and then just hitting that takedown again. So he's not really looking to go for full mount or go for submissions. He's just looking to win rounds with takedowns, win rounds with some ground and pound, and his striking is not very I'd say it's his weakness. I'd say if this fight stays on the feet, I think that Vera will be able to outstrike Sainz to probably a 2-1 decision. Sainz has a decent low kick and some nice boxing, like I said, but his defense is not very good. He does get hit a good amount, so I would if this fight is if Vera is somehow able to stuff all the shots of Sainz and constantly get back up to his feet, I see Vera winning this fight via 2-1 decision just by landing the harder strikes on the feet. But if Vera starts slow as usual and gets taken down and gets tired and is exhausted from defending the takedowns attempts of Sainz, I could easily see Sainz winning this fight on the scorecards, edging out 2, possibly even 3 rounds. With Vera's slow start, you don't want to be a slow starter against a wrestler like Sainz because he will tire your arms out. But make this fight grueling, but before you know it, you're going to be too tired to be able to finish the fight like you did in your past couple fights against those low-level opponents in Kennedy and Buren. So I got to side with Sainz in this one, man. I think he will be able to hit the takedowns. I think he will be able to edge out 2 rounds, maybe drop the 3rd round to Vera or the 2nd round. But Sainz has got good cardio. He digs deep. If he's, if it's 1-1 going into the 3rd, I would really favor Sainz in that one. I think he, his style is good for icing rounds too, because if it's a close round with 30 seconds left, he can blast for that takedown and make a good impression on the judges' scorecards going into that last 30 seconds. So the pick is going to be Sainz to get this one done, and it's a 50-50 fight, honestly. So the value, I'd say, would be all over Sainz at 140. So I got a unit on him at plus 135. The next fight takes place in the featherweight division. We have Bobby Moffitt, who is 14-3, taking on Bryce Mitchell, who is 10-0. The betting line for this one opened up Bobby Moffitt as the minus 185 favorite to Bryce Mitchell at plus 145. Right now, over at our affiliated sportsbook, 5Dimes, we see Bobby Moffitt minus 165, Bryce Mitchell plus 145. So two-way action coming in on this fight. I'm a bit surprised that Bobby Moffitt is not more of a favorite in this fight, honestly. Bobby Moffitt impressed the hell out of me in his last fight. He actually closed the favorite to Chas Skelly. And Chas Skelly was a proven guy in the UFC. He had, something like 7-8 fights in the UFC against, really good competition and some nice wins. And Bobby Moffitt making his UFC debut, coming off the Tuesday Night Contender Series, and he goes in there and he taps out Chas Skelly. Not only a good grappler and a good wrestler, but just a good overall fighter. So really impressive victory from Bobby Moffitt in that debut. Bryce Mitchell also picked up a nice win in his last fight on the Ultimate Fighter 27 finale. He was on the that season, the Ultimate Fighter, lost to Brad Katona. A really good fight with Brad Katona on the Ultimate Fighter. I would recommend checking that fight out. It's on Ultimate Fighter season 27. You can, I think it's episode 10 of that season. But yeah, Katona and Mitchell had a really good fight. And Mitchell was able to edge out that close victory against Tyler Diamond in his last fight. But he did not look too impressive doing it, honestly. He did have some good takedowns in that fight. His striking is pretty solid, honestly. He's got a good left hand. He's got a solid body kick, but his ground game is just not very good. I think that Bobby Moffitt is going to control this fight on the ground, and he's going to probably submit Bryce Mitchell at some point. He doesn't look he doesn't look like he knows what he's doing off of his back. He was taken down by Katona and lost the grappling in exchange of his nose fight. On the feet it was a pretty close striking match with Katona. Katona's got good boxing as well, but Mitchell definitely looked like he was more comfortable on the feet in that fight. And he doesn't have the great takedown defense, Bryce Mitchell, and he's very reckless getting back up to his feet. He just explodes back up to his feet whenever he gets taken down. So I think that will leave him open for a submission at some point for Bobby Moffitt. And another thing that's going to come into play in this fight is the low kick. Bobby Moffitt throws a mean low calf kick. He was spamming it in that fight against Chas Skelly, and he did so in the Tuesday Night Contender Series as well against Kilburn in that fight. So and if you watch Bryce Mitchell's fight against Tyler Diamond, he does not, and against Katona, he does not check those leg kicks very much. He does not seem to think that they think it's a valid defense to check those leg kicks. But I guarantee you that Moffitt will be throwing that calf kick, and he will be immobilizing Mitchell early, making it easier to get that takedown, making it harder for Mitchell to explode back up to his feet. So at some point, I think Moffitt gets the takedown, wears him out with top control and some ground and pound for a few minutes, and then eventually gets the submission probably in round 2 of this one. So the pick is going to be Moffitt to get this one done by submission. And, at minus 165, I really like Moffitt in the spot. Next fight taking place in the women's the women's flyweight division. We have Macy Barber, who is 6-0, taking on JJ Aldrich, who is 7-2. The opening betting line for this one was Barber at minus 265 to Aldrich at plus 185. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook 5dimes.eu, we see Barber at minus 245, Aldrich at plus 205. So there's two-way action coming in this fight. I'd say a little more on Barber's way. This line actually bounced all over the place. At one point, Macy Barber was at plus 195, which is where I was fortunate enough to bet her at. I think she got to plus 185. That was the best that she was at. But plus 195 is looking pretty good. She's been at 220, 230, now at 245 all week. So I'd say I'm happy with my price that I got on her. But it's definitely not a slam dunk matchup. Barber is definitely the less experienced fighter in this one. She's got more experience in the UFC. Barber's only have one fight in the UFC, but I like to. I don't think that Barber. I wouldn't classify her as green at all. I mean, she's fought on LFA her entire career. Not exactly a very low level promotion. She's been in the spotlight early. She's had 6 fights in 2 years. Less than that. This will be her 7th fight in less than 2 years. So she's very, very active. And she really impressed me with that win over Hannah Cifers. And going into that fight, I thought Hannah Cifers was going to be a pushover. I thought she was brought in as a lamb to slaughter. But we learned in her last fight that Hannah Cifers is no joke. She picked up a very nice win in her last fight against Poliana Viana. As a big underdog, she still wasn't getting that respect. So Cifers is no joke, and Barber ran through Cifers, man. She the first round she had a little bit of trouble with Cifers. She wasn't able to get the takedown, and Cifers' takedown defense was holding strong, but in the second round, man, Barber just went after her. Barber throws a lot of kicks, man. She's a big, long girl, and she can, she's got super long legs, and she, can cover a lot of distance with them. So she'll be throwing a lot of body kicks, a lot of head kicks. She's, vicious with the elbows. She loves elbows on the feet, on the ground. She had a nasty TKO of Hannah Cifers with some ground and pound elbows in her last fight. Cifers was an absolute bloody mess. And Cifers is strong, man. She had, like I said, she did defend the takedown a while from Barber in that one, and she was able to, hold her own against Viana. She was able to, stuff takedowns and, win that fight against Viana. So Cifers is really strong, and Barber was able to, straight muscle her down to the canvas and, bully her in the clinch, bully her on the ground with that top pressure. But Aldrich is, she's used to, taking on some stiff competition. She was an underdog in the last fight against Poliana Viana, like who I just mentioned, And I think, here's the thing, I think that people are, high on Aldrich right now. She is on a 3-fight win streak, but look who over that win streak is. It's over Chan Mi Jun, who, if I recall correctly, is very, very low-level opponent is Chan Mi Jun, losing her last fight to Shuri Kondo, 2 of the lowest-level women in the UFC. Danielle Taylor, unanimous decision in that one. That's Danielle Taylor's a little more legit. She's definitely a decent fighter of her own right, so that's a nice one. But Viana, she beat Viana in that fight. The sharp money was coming in on Aldrich all week in that fight, and we knew that Viana was a terrible striker. She's not very special on the ground either. She's labeled as some ground specialist, but in reality she's like your average purple belt from your local jiu-jitsu gym. So Aldrich picked up a nice win in that one. She's riding that win streak, so she's people are high on her. So I do favor Barbara in this matchup, obviously because I bet on her. I think that Barbara's going to be pressuring her. She's going to be kicking her. I just don't think Aldrich has the physicality and the power to be able to back Barbara up and to keep Barbara off her. Barbara's going to be marching forward on the feet and looking either for a takedown or looking to get in the clinch and land elbows and knees in the clinch. And I just think that Aldrich is going to have a hard time stopping her from dictating the pace that she wants to. Aldrich does have some decent takedown defense. She can defend a shot. But when you start stringing those takedowns together, when you go for, one, she stuff it, and then you go right to the second one, that's when she gets taken down. You saw that in the fight against Tatiana Suarez on Tough. No shame in that loss because Suarez is a beast, but that was, a much greener version of Suarez. And, like I said, Aldrich defends one takedown, but then gets taken down on the second one. She's got good submission defense. She did not get submitted easily in that one. Eventually, she did get rear naked choked, I believe, by Suarez, but she did not go down easily. She's training with really good training partners out in Colorado, Rose Namajunas, and I think Shevchenko as well trains at that Colorado gym from time to time. So she's getting good training in, no doubt. This is definitely a close matchup. I think Aldrich could steal a 29-28 type of decision if she's able to stuff the shots, get her boxing going, and outbox Barber. I would say Barber's weakness is probably her boxing. She's a bit hittable on the feet. And her head movement is a little bit off, and so Aldrich has a path to victory. It's getting some respect, sitting down on some boxing shot, on some punches, and edging out that 29-28 decision. But I gotta side with Barber. I think that Barber is going to be like I said, her pressure is going to be relentless. She's going to be just swarming offense nonstop, and I think that she's a good chance at stopping Aldrich in the second or third round, or cruising her way to a decision, maybe 3-0. So pick is going to be Macy Barber to get this one done. And another note on this fight, Macy Barber is 20 years old. I think she's the youngest UFC fighter on the roster. Super impressive. And both of these women are moving up to strawweight in this fight. So, I was a little bit worried that Barber was moving up. Both of these women seem pretty fit for strawweight, but it's interesting that they're both moving up. I don't really understand why, but regardless, hope that Barber picks that one up. So, speaking of changing weight classes, we got in the featherweight division, we have Luis Pena, who is 5-1, taking on Steven Peterson, who is 17-7. The opening betting line for this one is Luis Pena at -230 to Steven Peterson at +170. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.eu, we see Pena -250, Peterson at +210. So two-way action coming on this fight, but a little more Pena's way. It's Pena looked really unimpressive in his last fight. He came into that fight, people thinking he was going to be possibly a prospect at 155. He was coming off the Ultimate Fighter, looked really good on that show. I don't think he was able to. I think he had to pull out of the season because of injury, but he still fought on the finale and picked up a really nice win over Richie Smullen via guillotine in that fight. But the fight against Trizano, I don't know if he was sick in that fight or something bad happened to him before the fight, but he looked very, very mediocre in that fight. His footwork was off. He was overextended on his punches. He was getting taken down. He did not look good on the ground. It was just a very, very worrisome performance from Pena in that one. And what do you want to see after a fighter does that? You want to see him take 6-9 months off, tighten all the holes in his game, and come back better. But instead, Pena decides to come back 4 months later, and he decides to drop a weight class down to 145. This man is 6'3". That's big for a lightweight, and he's now dropping down to a featherweight on some George Roop shit. Man, that's incredible. I can't believe that. I don't know where he's getting that 10 pounds from. I thought he looked pretty shaky at 155 in his last fight. Maybe the weight cut was a reason why he looked so mediocre in the cage against Trizano, but the man's dropping another 10 pounds from that skinny frame. I don't think this is just like a recipe for disaster. Honestly, I think that Pena is overlooked on the books right now at -250 just based on this alone. I mean, how can you trust this guy at -250 after he looked like shit in his last fight, and he's deciding to drop another, 6 to 8% of his body weight, in addition to however much he's cutting. So that's bad news. The only reason why he could win this fight is because his opponent, Steven Peterson, is low level. He has terrible boxing defense. He eats punches nonstop. He's got some decent grappling. He can definitely hold his own in the grappling. I think that if Pena looks to level change in this one, I think it will be fairly competitive on the feet. I think Pena definitely has the biggest advantage on the feet in this one, but I don't know. Maybe it was the first time that he fought on like a regular UFC card. The Ultimate Fighter finale isn't much of a UFC card. He finally fought on the UFC's 25th anniversary show. He maybe had a bad weight cut, and that's why he looked so bad in that fight. And maybe he'll look a lot more polished. His striking will look like it did back in the Ultimate Fighter. And maybe there'll be a new Pena out there. But like I said, Peterson's going to give him the fight he wants. He'll probably will stand right in front of him. He doesn't really check leg kicks. He doesn't really move his head too much. So I think that Pena will be kicking his leg in this one. I think that Peterson will be eating Pena's boxing all night, and Pena will probably win a decision 2-1. But it would not surprise me if Steven Peterson tested that chin of Pena somehow with some loopy overhand punch, maybe just rock that chin of Pena, cutting down all that weight. So, the pick is going to be Pena, but honestly, I think there might be a little bit of value on Peterson. I definitely would not trust Pena at -250. Moving on to the next fight in the flyweight division, we have Jussier Formiga, who is 22-5, taking on Deiveson Figueiredo, who is 15-0. The betting line for this one is Figueiredo opened the -175 favorite to Formiga at +135. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook 5dimes.eu, we see Figueiredo -142, Formiga at +125. So interesting. I definitely think where the opening line was set was a bit too high in Figueiredo's favor, and we're seeing some steady action coming in on Formiga these past few days. Looks like around March 16th. Since then he's been steadily dropping. It was up to +155 at one point. Wow, 165 was the highest he got, and now he's all the way down to +120 for Formiga. I definitely think that's the right side of this fight to be on, Formiga. Figueiredo's record says 15-0, but between you and I, he's 14-1. He lost that fight to Jared, the Monkey God Brooks. It's pretty crazy that the UFC cut Jared Brooks, considering his how skilled that guy is. I think he was 2-2 in the UFC, and I think both of those loss against Figueiredo, he won that fight, and that loss against Torres, he was winning that fight before he knocked himself out. So he could be 4-0 in the UFC if he fought smart, and the UFC just cut him. And it doesn't even seem like they're getting rid of the flyweight division after all. We have freaking Eric Shelton and Jordan Espinosa on this card, and you're cutting guys like Jared Brooks and Shorty Torres and stuff like that. It's just very questionable decisions in the UFC's management. But that's the status quo over here at Martian MMA, and we're used to it. So let's get back to the matchup in this one. This is by far the closest matchup on the card, man. It's so hard to get a read on these two guys. They're very evenly matched. They're both very well rounded, and this fight should be the main event. No doubt about it. This fight should be the main event. In the main event, you have Stephen Thompson, who's fought in main events for like his past 5 out of his 6 most recent fights have been 5-round fights. And he's typically a very, low output, a pretty boring guy. I think 3 or 4 of those fights that he's been in have been really boring. Till fight, boring. Both the Taiwan fights, boring. McDonald fight, boring. So, like I said, 4 out of his last fights were all... Actually, no, more than that. More than that. This dude is just constantly scheduled for main events. I don't know why. The UFC wants to torture us with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fights. Anthony Pettis is moving up from 155, has no title implications at 170. He's never going to sniff the title shot at 170. Meanwhile, you have 2 of the top 3 flyweights in the world right now, not including the champion, Henry Cejudo. The number 1 is Joseph Benavidez. Formiga and Figueiredo are no doubt number 2 and 3 flyweights in the world right now. We've never seen either of these guys go 5 rounds, and we deserve to. These guys are knocking at the door of a title shot, and they haven't had 5-round experience yet. Wow, that's pretty important. You want to have good title fight. The reason why Demetrius Johnson was smoking the competition for the longest time is because the UFC would see a flyweight win 3 fights in a row. It would be over low-level competition. They wouldn't have any championship experience, and they'd throw him into a fight with Demetrius Johnson, and he gets slaughtered. They never give the flyweights the 5-round experience they need, and you're seeing that as evident as ever with this fight being the 3rd fight on the main card. While you have, Curtis Blades, Justin Willis ahead of them, John Makdessi, Jesus Pinedo ahead of them. This is the best fight on the card. It's the closest matchup on the card. And, it's going to be a great fucking fight. So let's get into, the matchup in this one. I've watched a ton of fights on these guys. And, like I said, I still don't have a solid read on who's going to win. I don't have a strong lean at all. I capped this fight dead even at 50-50. So with that being said, the value would be on the underdog at Formiga at plus 120. It's getting close to a pass on on both sides in this one. It's just going to be so good. I don't really want to bet aside because I just want to sit back and enjoy it. I think this fight will have stand up. It'll have wrestling. It'll have scrambles. It'll have jiu-jitsu in it. It's going to be a great fucking fight. So. The striking advantage, I would say, goes to Figueiredo in this one. He throws with a little more power. The dude's got solid boxing. He drops his opponents a lot. He finishes them with ground and pound, and he's not too good defensively. He got dropped by Denis Araujo back in the Jungle Fight. That's an insane fight. Deiveson Figueiredo versus Denis Araujo in a Jungle Fight 90. Just watch that fight on YouTube right now. It's a crazy fight. I won't spoil it for you, but actually I kind of just did. But Araujo drops Figueiredo in that fight twice. It was a crazy back and forth war. Figueiredo eventually finishes him in the 2nd round, but he showed a lot of weakness in that fight. There were times where Figueiredo looked tired, had his hands down, and got dropped with punches. So, he stayed in there. He fought for, a single leg and didn't get finished. So, the dude's tough as hell. But, that's definitely something to look out for. But his opponent, Formiga, does not have much power on the feet. He's very technical on the feet. He's got very underrated striking. He's got a nice leg kick. He's got, solid defense. He doesn't really get hit too much on the feet. So, the striking might be a little closer than we think, but I think what it's going to come down to is power. I think that Formiga, even though he's got good technique and might land some strikes, I think that when Figueiredo lands, it's gonna affect Formiga. While when Formiga lands, I think Figueiredo will just walk through it. So, where this fight, I think, has the biggest edge, I think, would honestly be the ground for Formiga, even though, again, Figueiredo, very solid on the ground. Formiga, I think, is just slightly better. Formiga is, gets almost all of his opponents to the ground. I think he's only lost 1, maybe 2 fights where he's taken opponents down. And that was the Ray Borg fight, and I think that's it. I think the Ray Borg fight is the only fight that Formiga has lost where he took his opponent down. Cejudo, I don't think he was able to take his opponent down in that one, and that's why he lost that one. But Cejudo, no shame in not taking him down. But Formiga's takedowns are not that great. His opponents usually end up getting on the ground somehow, whether it's catching kicks or the fight against Dustin Ortiz had a lot of weird scrambles where the fight just ended up on the ground. And that's where Formiga shines. He gets great position. He takes your back. Some of the best back takes and best back control in the UFC. It's not end all be all. You're not getting submitted, no doubt, versus Formiga, because some guys with decent ground defense, like Sergio Pettis, was able to defend the back attack of Formiga. Dustin Ortiz has great submission defense, was able to defend it. Ray Borg, good submission defense, was able to defend the attacks of Formiga. So if Formiga takes Figueiredo's back, it's not the end-all be-all. Figueiredo has a ton of power and will just blast out of positions. He will just use power and twist out, or will bump out of positions. And, that's definitely going to come into play in this fight. But if you do that against Formiga, there's a good chance you could get submitted. You get mounted and you try blasting out of there. He will take that back and he'll sink in that rear naked choke before you even know what happened to you. So that's I think the Figueiredo has the edge on the feet. I think he's got the power advantage on the feet. He could even drop and possibly rock Formiga on the feet, while I think Formiga's got the edge on the ground. He could possibly submit Figueiredo on the ground. But, wherever this fight goes, it's going to be close. Like I said, I think whoever wins this fight will squeak out a 29-28 decision. Each fighter has a small chance at finishing. I think Figueiredo has a small chance at, TKOing Formiga. Formiga has a small chance at submitting Figueiredo. But, I can't imagine listening to me right now saying Formiga and Figueiredo back and forth, trying to distinguish who is who. It's very tough. Both crazy Brazilian, well-rounded guys with crazy last names. But, I give the slight edge to Formiga, honestly. I think he's fought the better competition. He's dealt with explosive guys like Dustin Ortiz before. He's, tapped out some really high-level guys like Oka Sasaki, Scott Jorgensen. He's got very nice wins on his resume. Figueiredo does as well. He defended the takedowns very well against John Moraga. Really good grappler. Was able to finish him soon after. He finished Joseph Morales. He had a corner stoppage of Marcos Beltran. The dude hits hard and he knocks a lot of people out. So if Formiga's diving for those takedowns and he's not having much success and this fight is on the feet, look for Figueiredo to knock Formiga out. So, like I said, razor close fight. It's dead 50-50. Can't pick a side. The value, I'd say, is on Formiga as the underdog, and I give gun to my head, I gotta pick Formiga. But I just can't wait for this fight. It's the best matchup of the card, and can't stress it enough how much this fight deserves to be 5 rounds. But that's enough about that. We'll move on to the next fight in the lightweight division. We have John Makdessi, who is 16-6, taking on Jesus Pinedo, who is 16-4. The betting line for this one opened up John Makdessi as the favorite at -215 to Jesus Pinedo at +165. We're now seeing Pinedo at +260 to Makdessi at -320. So much more action coming in on Makdessi's way. Very understandably, this fight is it's pretty clear to read. It should be contested mostly on the feet. Pinedo, I believe, made his UFC debut in his last fight, defeating Devin Powell by decision. Not really too impressive of a victory in there. Devin Powell is a pretty low-level opponent, and Pinedo did not look too impressive, beating him. His striking looks, pretty average. He's very unorthodox in the feet. He has a lot of wasted movement where he's shaking out his arms and he's bouncing around and he's doing all types of weird stuff with his arms. But, I just think that his striking is very sloppy. I think Makdessi is going to be levels ahead of him on the feet. I think if Pinedo tries to change levels, Makdessi will either use his distance to throw some knees and avoid the clinch at all, or Makdessi will use his good takedown defense to stuff off the takedowns of Pinedo. And then once it's on the feet, I think Makdessi will just have a clear as day advantage. His kicks are great. He's got good distance control. He doesn't get hit much. He's got good boxing. He moves in and out a lot. And the only problem with Makdessi is that he can be a little bit low output. He can throw, he can look to counter punch a little too much and maybe let rounds slip away from him from time to time. So that's the way that Pinedo wins this fight. If he does, he, edges out a 29-28 decision, just being more active than Makdessi. If he's constantly moving forward, he's got Makdessi on his back foot, and Makdessi is just being a little too tentative like he sometimes is, then, Pinedo could steal this one on the scorecards. But I give that a very low chance of happening. I think Makdessi will control this fight on the feet. I think that he'll easily outstrike Pinedo to a decision, possibly even a late finish. So the pick is going to be Makdessi, and he's a nice parlay piece at -320 or whatever. And if you got in on him at the money line in the the -200 range, congrats to you. It's a little too steep right now to trust on the money line at -320. But with that being said, we're going to move on to the co-main event in the heavyweight division. We have Curtis Razor Blades, who is 10-2, taking on Justin Willis, who is 8-1. The opening betting line for this one was Blades at -245 to Willis at +175. Looking over at our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.eu, we are seeing Curtis Blades -260 to Justin Willis at +220. So two-way action coming in this fight with a little more on Blades' way. I definitely agree with the action on this. I'm honestly a little bit surprised that the line isn't steeper for Curtis Blades. Curtis Blades was just a 2-1 favorite over Francis Ngannou. He closed -250 against Francis Ngannou, and he's now -260 versus Justin Willis. I don't know. I mean, I hear a lot of people out there talking like I wouldn't trust Curtis Blades at the price. Honestly, 260 seems like a great price for Curtis Blades in this fight. Starting things off, we'll go with Willis. Willis is, he's a fat boxer. There's a lot of heavyweights who are bigger, fatter guys, but this guy is truly like a chubby, guy who has, no diet, no discipline or anything. It looks like he could cut down to 185 pounds if he really dieted hard for a couple months. He just not a natural heavyweight at all. He's maybe 5'9", 5'10". Like I said, if he was really strict about his diet, he could lose a lot of weight. But that's gonna be a very big detriment to him in this fight. Curtis Blades is gonna be looking to blast takedowns. He's one of the best wrestlers in the UFC. The dude averages like 10 takedowns a fight or something like that. He's just constantly going for takedowns. He's got great ground and pound. He's got an iron chin. People are gonna think that his chin is not very good because of that most recent Francis Ngannou knockout. That was not a show of a bad chin. He got caught with a punch, around the shoulder, hit him right in the back of the ear. Anybody would go down to that shot from Curtis Blades. You punch this dude in the face, you knee him in the face, he doesn't give a fuck. In the Overeem fight, Overeem hit him with a combination of punches and 2 rock solid knees to the jaw, and Curtis Blades marched through it and took Overeem down right away. And Overeem's not easy to take down. Overeem's got a good takedown defense, and he's got good jiu-jitsu. And, Blades was able to take him down easy. He was able to get on top easy, and he was able to smash him. That was easily Blades' most impressive victory. And, that performance was why people were thinking that he was going to go in there against Ngannou and, was able to replicate the same game plan. Just go take him down and blast him out. So, Justin Willis, he's, like I said, he does have good boxing. He's got fast hands. He's got some power in his hands. The opponents that he's faced so far, and excluding Mark Hunt, Chase Sherman, Alan Crowder, he was able to blast them. He was able to knock them down, almost finish Chase Sherman. It seems like he has a little bit of finishing problems. It seemed like he had Chase Sherman out of there a few times, but was just not able to finish. Didn't have too much trouble with Alan Crowder. He was able to put Crowder down, and the referee was able to step in there for that one. That was more of an obvious knockout, but he struggles with the ground and pound. He's able to knock his opponents down, but he's just not able to finish up with that ground and pound to get the TKO victory. But I don't think that the Willis punches are going to phase Curtis Blades in this one. Mark Hunt was landing bombs on Curtis Blades' chin, and Blades was marching through them again. And Blades is no slouch on the feet. He's definitely his grappling and his wrestling is definitely his strength, but he's got decent striking as well. He throws a powerful leg kick. He can fight behind a jab sometimes, and he's just setting up that takedown. He gets you thinking about the striking a little bit, pawing that jab and kicking your leg a little bit, and then he'll blast that double. I think he has probably the best double leg takedown of anybody in the UFC. So. We've never seen Justin Willis, defend takedowns. His cardio does not look very good. He definitely has a drop off in cardio. His power drops off big time. So Willis's path to victory is in the first round of this fight. If he's able to test that chin of Blades coming off of that knockout against Ngannou, that's his best chance to win this fight. But if this fight gets out of the first round, I think that Willis almost has no chance. I think that Blaydes will take over, possibly get that ground and pound TKO like he did against Overeem, or win this decision 2 to 3 rounds in the bag for Blaydes. So the pick is going to be Razor Blaydes to get this one done. Alright, so we have arrived at the main event of the evening. In the welterweight division, we have Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who is 14-3-1, taking on Anthony Pettis, who is 21-8. The opening betting line for this one was Wonderboy as the favorite at -285 to Pettis as the dog at +205. Right now, over on our affiliated sportsbook, 5dimes.iu, we are seeing Thompson -390 to Anthony Pettis at +320. So a lot more action coming in on Stephen Thompson's way. I don't really blame it at all. This matchup makes no sense whatsoever. You have a lightweight, a career-long lightweight. The guy even tried dropping down to 145 for a period in time for 2 fights, and eventually moved back up to 155. But he is now moving up to 170, coming off that loss to Tony Ferguson. Anthony Pettis has had a steep fall from grace. Pretty crazy. At one point was 17-2, the UFC champion of the world. He was on the Wheaties box, and then since then has gone 3-6 in his past 9 fights, which is just crazy. And it's against a murderer's row of competition, but still, regardless. Pettis has definitely had a bit of a drop off over his career, and he's not getting an easy fight here. Stephen Thompson, even though he's struggled a bit lately too with that quote unquote loss to Darren Till, he did come up short in those 2 fights against Tyron Woodley as well. Stephen Thompson is still one, I'd say probably the best striker in the UFC. I'd say the other ones would be Robert Whittaker, Max Holloway. And those would be it. Maybe T.J. Dillashaw, but Stephen Thompson has knocked out Robert Whittaker. So in the first round too, he's knocked out a lot of good guys. Jake Ellenberg, Johnny Hendricks. Excuse me. He's got wicked kicks. He's got incredible boxing. He comes from that karate background. He's got that wicked sideways stance. And he's always whipping kicks around. He's got crazy distance control. I think Thompson's most impressive victory would be over Jorge Masvidal, especially over how great Masvidal looked this past weekend. We all know that he just knocked out Darren Till. Masvidal was able to, Thompson just outclassed Masvidal. He dropped him in that fight. He was keeping Masvidal at range. He was outboxing him, and Masvidal's got some of the best boxing in the UFC. So that just goes to show how good Stephen Thompson's kicking game is, and how good his distance control is, how good his game planning is, that he was able to work around Masvidal's boxing and then basically beat him at his own game. He really did beat him with pretty much strictly boxing in that fight. He was just outstriking Masvidal at will. Really, really impressive performance from Stephen Wonderboy Thompson in that fight. And in that fight against Darren Till, I gave Thompson 3 or 4 rounds in that fight. Maybe Till won rounds 4 or 5 or something like that. But man, I think Stephen Thompson won that fight pretty clearly. You could even argue that he won the fight against Tyron Woodley at UFC 209. That fight he lost via a majority decision. So this dude has, never really been clearly beaten by anybody. I think Matt Brown beat him back in the day pretty clearly. But in the past, 5 or 6 years, it's been hard to beat Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He's a tough puzzle to solve. And I think that Anthony Pettis is going to have little to no success solving that puzzle. Where this fight gets interesting, if it's possible to get it to the ground, I think, Pettis definitely has the advantage on the ground. But Thompson's got great takedown defense. His distance control, his kicks make it hard for you to close that distance, make it hard for you to get a takedown. One thing about Thompson is he does not like those leg kicks. He doesn't like getting his that oblique kick. He actually was, been talking about getting that kick banned for a long time for now. So, look for Pettis to be chopping out those legs. My man chops those legs really well. He didn't give a fuck. Tony Ferguson just hurt his knee when coming off knee surgery. He started that fight targeting that weakness of Tony Ferguson kicking those legs right away. And I believe Stephen Thompson's coming off of a knee injury as well in that Till fight. I think he got his knee a little bit jacked up from one of those oblique kicks. So look for Pettis to be throwing that oblique kick right away. He is definitely aware of Thompson complaining about that kick being banned a lot. And he knows that it'll be, a psychological thing if Pettis is able to start landing that kick early. Thompson even said that in that fight against Till that he, after a while, he wasn't concerned about winning. He was concerned about, saving his knee. So, look for Pettis to try to exploit that weakness of Thompson. That's honestly where I see Thompson, where Pettis having some success. If he's able to start kicking those legs and immobilizing Wonderboy Thompson a little bit, then I can see him, possibly rocking Thompson on the feet, possibly getting a takedown, maybe capitalizing on on a submission. But I give Pettis almost no chance, winning a decision in this one. I don't think he can ice out 3 rounds. I think that the most likely way this fight goes is, Thompson outstriking Pettis, keeping this fight on the feet. Pettis is going to be willing to trade with Thompson on the feet, and Thompson is just going to be easily keeping that distance, easily kicking him, easily outboxing him. So the pick is going to be the huge favorite to get this one done, Stephen Thompson. But if Anthony Pettis gets those oblique kicks going and gets in the head of Stephen Thompson early in this fight, look for it to be interesting. I will definitely look into be maybe live betting this one if Pettis is able to start kicking that leg early. But that's really the only chance I give Pettis in this one. My man should have stayed at 155. He's clearly a welter, or clearly a lightweight, and moving up that extra 15 pounds is probably going to be bad for him. I could even see Thompson knocking out Pettis in this one. There's going to be a huge size discrepancy in this one, and I think there will even be a pretty big striking discrepancy for Thompson. I think Thompson will be able to easily outclass Pettis, possibly to a 50-45 decision if he doesn't finish him. So the pick is going to be Thompson to get this one done. So that is going to do it for the UFC Nashville card going down this weekend. Remember, this one is starting a little bit earlier, 5 p.m. Eastern Time. The prelims kick off on ESPN in this one, while the main card of this one kicks off at 9 p.m. So with that being said, we're just going to quickly recap the UFC on London card that went down this past weekend, headlined by Darren Till versus Jorge Masvidal. It was a great card from top to bottom. Had a lot of decisions in it. Wasn't the most thrilling card at all, but still were some very solid fights in this card. So starting things off, Mike Grundy TKO'd Nad Narimani in the second round of this fight. Mike Grundy looking very improved. His striking looked very solid in this one. We didn't really get a good feel for his boxing on the regional tape, but he made some really good improvements over his time off and was able to outbox Narimani. A little bit of a back and forth brawl in the second round. I think Grundy had Narimani hurt, then Narimani hurt Grundy, and then Grundy was able to finish Narimani for the TKO. So pretty exciting back and forth fight to start things off. Next fight, Molly McCann defeated Cachoeira 2-1. Kind of a hilarious fight, just slot fest, low level MMA like we all expected. It was pretty hilarious to watch. McCann's eyes swelled up with a hematoma the size of a golf ball. So props to her for being tough enough to grind out that victory. She won the first 2 rounds of that fight and then dropped the third round to Cachoeira. But next fight, Ige ran through Danny Henry. I think he dropped Danny Henry with a punch and then took his back and choked him out for the submission right away. Very nice victory from Ige. Sapabek Safarov defeated Nikolai Neergamanu via decision. Another hilarious fight. Safarov was grabbing the cage nonstop. I've never seen someone break the rules of MMA more in one fight than Sapabek Safarov did. He grabbed the cage 20 times in this fight. It was absolutely hilarious. I was cracking the fuck up so loud watching this fight. And his opponent was doing it too. Like, the reason why the referee was letting it go is because this guy I doubt speaks a lick of English, and then B, his opponent Nikolai Neergamanu was grabbing the cage from time to time too. Neergamanu was making his UFC debut in this one. We had some worries that he had not fought any good competition, that he would be rudely awakened to the UFC by Safarov, and that really came to fruition. Honestly, this was Safarov did get 1 point deducted in the first round of this one, but he still won that round. He won the round pretty clearly from Neergamanu. So I gave that first round 9-9 for Safarov. Round 2 was an absolute slaughter from Safarov. He beat Nurmagomedov within an inch of his life. It was, a 10-8, no doubt about it. I would honestly give the round 10-7. There were judges who scored this round 10-9. That is absolutely inexcusable. We saw a lot of bad scorecards throughout the night, and we'll get to them later. But I think that giving 10-9 to Safarov in round 2 is absolutely unexcusable. The fight was inches away from being finished. It should have been finished multiple times. It was completely dominated by Safarov. Every criteria for 10-8, 10-7. It was, an absolute beating. And then in the third round, Safarov went on and, again, completely dominated the round from start to finish. It was another 10-8 round. So 9-9, 10-7, 10-8. I gave those scorecards 29-24 to Safarov in this one. A very unique scorecard. But the judges gave it 29-26, 29-26, 29-27. So, very worrisome that those judges didn't give those rounds 10-8. It just shows that they don't really understand 10-8 rounds. So, people like to debate often about 10-8s and, what should have been a 10-8, what shouldn't have been. That debate is mostly hypothetical because the judges who are scoring these fights don't seem to know the criteria either. So, that being said, Mark Diakese just completely outclassed Joseph Duffy to a 3-0 decision. He pitched a shutout, and this one was an underdog, a plus 160 or 70 underdog. Back against the wall, 3-fight losing streak, and comes in and takes out Joe Duffy in this one. Very nice win for Diakese in this one. Arnold Allen shut down Jordan Rinaldi in this fight. Rinaldi just couldn't get the takedowns going at all, and Allen just was easily outstruck Rinaldi to a 3-0 decision. Jack Marshman versus John Phillips, not the fight we expected at all. We expected two, Welsh boxers to swing for the fences and one guy to get knocked out, but that did not really happen at all. It was kind of a low-level, low-output decision, mostly consistent with the boxing. I thought, it was probably 1-1 going into the third. I probably edged round 3 to Phillips, but the judges gave it to Marshman, and it was not a robbery. You see a lot of people calling this fight a robbery. It wasn't. John Phillips did next to nothing in round 3. Neither guy did anything in round 3. Neither guy really deserved to win the round, but they gave the round to Marshman. Not the worst thing in the world. But next fight we had Claudio Silva versus Danny Roberts. Man, this fight was so fucking painful to watch. I had a bet on Danny Roberts. I did a lot of tape on this one. I knew Danny Roberts had some decent jiu-jitsu. I thought that he would be able to escape the jiu-jitsu positions of Silva, which was true. I thought that Silva would take Roberts down. Roberts would get put in some submissions, but he would eventually defend those submissions and then be able to knock Silva out after Silva gasses out, like he always does. That happened. Silva put him in some nasty spots. Then Roberts was able to escape. He was able to hurt Silva on the feet. He just wasn't able to finish. It was one of the lowest level IQ fights I've ever seen a fighter fight. Danny Roberts had Silva out of there multiple times in this fight where if he just backed off, let the ref stand him up, Silva would have had no legs about him. He would have landed one more punch and Silva would have went down for the TKO. But every time Roberts hurt Silva, he would get excited. He would, fall to the ground. He would get sucked into Silva's guard, and then all of a sudden he'd be defending submissions again. Just the most painful fight I've ever watched because the read was there, the finish was there for Roberts. I could see the green in sight. I could see the winning bets being cashed in sight, but just the dumbest possible moves from Roberts ever to go into Silva's guard and then get armbarred. Very controversial finish as well. It looked like Silva was going for an armbar. Roberts was trying to get out of there. Roberts was doing everything he can to get out of the armbar, and he might have grunted a little. He might have made a noise, while he was getting out of there, and the ref stopped the fight based on a verbal tap. He didn't say tap, tap, tap. He didn't tap. He said, he moaned a little bit or grunted when he was trying to get out of an armbar. And, it does say a scream is a verbal tap. You're in an armbar and you scream, you scream really loud. I'm doing these fake sound effects. I don't want to scream too loud for the microphone. I bet my real scream and my fake scream sounded exactly the same. But you know what I'm saying. If a guy screams out in agony, then you should stop the fight. If a guy is like, kind of just grunting and kind of just moaning to get out of a bad spot, that happens all the time. A tight guillotine, you get, it starts constricting your neck, you start choking a little bit, but then you pop your head out. Or, that happens constantly. And Big John McCarthy, one of the best referees in MMA history, weighed in on the situation. He said, I will let a fighter grunt. I will let them moan. I will let them, make some noise in there. It's not until they shriek out in pain that I'm going to stop the fight. So he thinks that the ref made the wrong call. I agree. Dana White seemed to agree. He tweeted out saying, man, I hate when refs stop the fight. It seemed like Roberts could possibly have finished the fight in that last 90 seconds because Silva was just so gassed. He was clinging on to any submission he could. Props to Silva for staying in there. His jiu-jitsu is so good that even when he is completely out of it, he's able to, still threaten with a submission. So just impressive from him that he's able to do that. But, man, Silva is so bad, man. His cardio sucks. His striking sucks. He gets hit constantly. And he just pulled off the victory by slimmest of margins in this one. Slimmest of margins. He's fighting dumbasses like Danny Roberts and Nordine Taleb, who are, engaging in the grappling with him instead of, just making this one a striking battle. But, painful loss. The read was there, not the worst bet in the world because, like I said, the win was there. It was in sight, but Roberts was just too dumb to execute it. So, with that being said, Nathaniel Wood, Runic choked Jose Quinoa. Very impressive performance from Wood in this one. Continues to be, I think, a blue-chip prospect at bantamweight. Next fight, Dominic Reyes versus Volkan Ozdemir. A bit of a controversial decision in this one. I thought Dominic Reyes won this fight clearly. I thought, Volkan had some success on the feet. It was closer than I expected on the feet. And Volkan was able to get a few takedowns in this one. But if you look at the way that he got the takedowns, Volkan did nothing with him. He got the takedowns. Reyes was scoot back up to the fence. He got his butt to the cage, and he stood up. That took a lot more energy from Volkan to get the takedown than it did for Reyes to get up. And, if you look, that is not effective grappling. Effective grappling is not taking someone down, clinging onto their legs, and not having any success, and not advancing position, not getting any ground and pound, not threatening any submissions. He did nothing with his ground attacks. If you scored Volkan I haven't watched the fight over again. It wasn't exactly an exciting fight. I was, at the edge of my seat to watch over again. I had some money on Reyes. I had some money on Reyes' decision. So I was, happy with the result, obviously. And, but I scored it in real time. I remember saying, Volkan did nothing with their grappling in that one. He was outstruck clearly. I thought Reyes round one. I thought Reyes round all 3 rounds, honestly. He looked a little sloppy doing it. He looked tired. He didn't look too good doing it, but I thought that Reyes won all 3 rounds. At least one judge gave every round to Dominic Reyes, too, so it's really not that unreasonable to score that one 3-0 for Reyes. But, in terms of, the hype on Reyes, I'd say it's a little bit halted. I'd say, he definitely got exposed a little bit. His takedown defense got exposed. His cardio is not very good, and he's not as, lethal of a striker as we all expected. So, still a solid win from Reyes. He got past Ozdemir in this one. And people calling robbery are just sour about their Ozdemir bets losing in this one. So, moving on to the co-main event, Leon Edwards, putting on a great performance against Gunnar Nelson. His takedown defense looked great. His striking looked great. His elbows looked solid. He actually hurt Gunnar with an elbow really bad in this one. Eventually, Gunnar ended up on top and was able to ice out round 3 in this one. I guess he won round 3. Still a very impressive performance from Leon Edwards. He didn't really have Gunnar had no success on the ground. It was just, masterful performance from Edwards. And in the main event, we had Masvidal knock out Till in, an incredible fight. Fight starts off, Masvidal donkey kicks Darren Till in the dick literally 1 second into the fight. Right after that happened, I bet Masvidal. I was like, dude, if you get... he took a running start and Sparta kicked them in the balls. If you don't think that that's going to affect you in the fight, you're crazy. So, I'm like, dude, if you know that he got kicked in the nuts and he's still plus 175 right now, I'm going to happy to take a shot on him. So I took a little bit of a stab on Masvidal at that time. And then here, you take 30 seconds for the nut shot to recover, and Till blitzes Masvidal and drops him with the first punch he throws. I was thinking, holy shit, I'm so dumb. I thought that nut shot was gonna affect him. He came out like a raging bull and blitzed Masvidal and knocked him down. But Masvidal was able to withstand the early storm, get back up to his feet, and then be competitive for the rest of round one. I still thought Darren Till won the round, and in between rounds, Jorge Masvidal was a 3-1 underdog at BetDSI, plus 307 I bet my man at in between rounds. And sure enough, round 2 comes out, Masvidal starts looking a little better, starts being more comfortable at range, and then he throws himself a beautiful switch lead hook that rocked, that probably put Darren Till out with one punch, and then on the way down he lands another punch as he's on the way down, and then once Till's on the canvas, Jorge Masvidal follows it up with one last shot, a nice 3-piece, which we'll get to later. He hit him with the initial hook that knocked him down. On his way down, he hit him with a punch, and then once he was on the ground, he hit him with the one that put the nail in the coffin, silencing the crowd. 16,000 people in London for Darren Till, and Jorge Masvidal, the American, comes in there and shuts that down. Just an incredible performance from Masvidal. An absolutely beautiful punch, knockout of the year in my mind by far so far. We've seen some crazy. The other knockout that comes to mind is Henry Corrales versus Aaron Pico, a crazy firefight with another stiff KO where the dude is just stiff as a board on the ground. But that was you look at that. It's Aaron Pico's a lower level guy. He has 5 fights. It was a back and forth, rocking each other type of fight. Masvidal was losing this fight. He hadn't really hurt Till with any punches so far, and then out of nowhere he switches stances and throws a lead check hook and floors Darren Till with it. An absolutely beautiful punch and a high level technique. I just can't stress enough how beautiful that punch was for Masvidal, getting the knockout in round 2 of this one. So it was a successful betting card for me in this one. I won a little bit on Ige, won on Safarov, won a little on Diakese decision, lost on Rinaldi, won on Marshman decision, lost on Danny Roberts. Let's see, I won on Reyes and Reyes decision, and then I think I won on Fight Goes the Distance live for Edwards and Nelson, and then I won on Masvidal Moneyline live. So it was definitely a successful night for me. Hopefully I can keep the momentum going in the next week, and keep the units going up. And with that being said, we're gonna be done with recapping the card. But we have ourselves we haven't talked about the general news stories on the podcast for a while. The past couple of weeks I've been so focused on grinding out the podcast. We've had 8 UFCs in a row, so I haven't really been too willing to talk about the fights afterwards, talk about the general news in MMA after the podcast. But we'll mention a few stories now because we've had some worthy news in the past couple weeks. So the one thing was Conor McGregor getting arrested for smashing the people's phone. I knew that happened last week, and I chose not to mention it. It was such an insignificant event. Conor was in public or something like that. Someone got too close with their phone. He took the phone out of their hand, stomped it on the ground a bunch of times, picked it up and took it away with him. So I guess it's theft or whatever. Conor McGregor, he's doing Conor McGregor shit. He's been doing reckless shit like this. He's had a temper like this for years. I don't take any surprise in the fact that he got it's going to be like a misdemeanor crime. He's going to do no time. He's going to pay a fine, maybe some community service. He's done a lot worse things, and it's not worth really mentioning. Bigger news comes out of Tony Ferguson's way. Tony Ferguson's wife had to file, it seems like, a temporary restraining order on Tony Ferguson after some issues that Tony seems to be having. It seems like Tony is having some schizophrenia, some sort of paranoia going on. He thinks there's people in his walls listening to him, or there's a computer chip in his knee after his knee surgery, and he seems to be having a lot of problems mentally. And that's really sad because we've known Tony Ferguson as the crazy weird guy for years, and we thought that was his gimmick. He just liked being weird. He was a crazy enthusiastic strange guy. But now it's coming to light that he's had some, pretty bad, mental illnesses, it looks like. Whether it's, bipolar disorder, it could be, something drug related, or it could be like I said, schizophrenia or massive paranoia. I just feel really bad for the guy. He's one of the best fighters in the UFC right now. He's on a 12-13 fight win streak, and he's still struggling with mental illness. And it seems like he's going about it smart. It seems like he recognizes he has a problem. He posted the other day that he went to a psychiatrist appointment, and the MMA community has been very, very accepting of Ferguson. Initially we heard Ferguson had some problems with his wife over domestic problems. You're, oh shit, I hope he didn't hit his wife. I hope he didn't do anything with his kids or anything like that. And it seems like that was not the case. It seems like he has not been violent. It seems like he hasn't laid any hands on his kids or his wife, luckily, but he's just really struggling with those mental problems. And I guess his wife seems like that's enough for him to, need a restraining order for him to, maybe take the kids away from him. So super sad, super personal story on Tony Ferguson's behalf, but I hope the champ gets the help he needs, takes some time off, and comes back better than ever, because he's truly one of the best fighters in the UFC. Let's see what we got here. A couple announced fights: Rafael dos Santos versus Kevin Lee. Kevin Lee moving up to welterweight. A solid fight in that one. Donald Cerrone versus Al Iaquinta, 5-round lightweight fight. That'll be an amazing fight. We had Kamaru Usman on the Joe Rogan Experience. That was a great podcast. I recommend you listen to that. He talks about a lot of cool shit in that one. And the biggest news of the week, though, is coming out of TJ Dillashaw. TJ Dillashaw, in his own words, had an adverse finding in his sample that was taken in January. So what does that mean? He failed a drug test. He had an adverse finding in a sample that was taken. That's such a creative way of alluding to the fact that you failed a drug test. We've talked about USADA millions of times before. Personally, I'm against it. Personally, I think it's a huge invasion of privacy. I think it's ridiculous to be testing cage fighters for putting things in their body for making them better cage fighters. Especially in a sport where throughout the history, most of the cage fighters have been, doing these performance-enhancing drugs. It's a playing field that you cannot level. It's, people are constantly going to be having edges. People are constantly going to be developing new steroids that you're not going to have the drug testing for. And in order to combat the drug problem, you're having to police the fighters' lives, having to track their locations, having people waiting outside their gyms, their houses, for them to show up somewhere, knocking on their door at 6 a.m., waking up their entire families, testing their piss, testing their blood. I've talked about it all the time, about how USADA is a terribly corrupt organization, just completely orchestrated by the UFC. They pick and choose who they prosecute. It's a terrible organization. But regardless, TJ Dillashaw failed the drug test. It seems like it happened right around his time of his fight against against Henry Cejudo. My man has, there's pictures of him out there with a table. It's him eating, and a table with 40 pill bottles, 40 bottles of pills with supplements and amino acids and, energy drinks and, all types of fucking snake juice that the dude is taking. And, as Dave Dim at Dim Space on Twitter, one of a doping expert, pointed out, you can see in that picture, you can zoom in on the labels, and some of the companies that he's taking are companies that, have FDA warnings for, having tainted supplements. So, who knows if the dude is juicing? Who cares? If when I say juicing, I mean he's taking anabolic steroids, taking, intentionally taking performance-enhancing drugs. It could be tainted supplements. Like I said, the dude is taking a bunch of snake oil that's not tested by the FDA, that has problems with their, tainted supplements in the past. So he could certainly be popping for that. But I do know that the dude looks like a physical specimen. He's got a crazy strength and conditioning program. He's got, a coach, a dietitian, some doctor that is overseeing him 24/7 that is tracking his every body, tracking his meals, tracking his, his moods, his sleep, his blood pressure, his calories, his diet, everything. This guy is literally like overseeing TJ Dillashaw's life. That's a perfect guy to, facilitate and administer steroids to you. The dude is obviously a wizard when it comes to the body. He definitely knows how to, cycle athletes on PEDs, and, that could be why TJ Dillashaw had him in there. So, it certainly could be PEDs. It certainly could be a tainted supplement. Regardless what it is, it's sad that he's getting, sidelined. He's one of the best fighters in the UFC. He's got some of the best technique in the UFC. And now he could be out for a year, possibly more. He relinquished his title. He gave up the belt. The bantamweight title is now vacant. It leaves a lot of questions. Who is going to fight for that? Who's going to fight Marlon Moraes? Basically, Marlon Moraes deserves the title shot. No doubt about it. It just depends of who's going to fight him. Is it going to be former champion Dominic Cruz, who has struggled with injuries over the past couple years? Is it going to be Pedro Munoz, who's coming off and knocking out the former champion Cody Garbrandt, who's on a really good win streak? Or is it going to be Aljamain Sterling, who's also on a solid win streak at bantamweight, picking up a nice win over Jimmy Rivera in his last fight, just tapped out Cody Stamann? Or there's one more guy, and that's Henry Cejudo, the 125-pound flyweight champion who just knocked out TJ Dillashaw. They were probably going to run that fight back at 135, and I would guess that Cejudo is going to get the title shot against Marlon Moraes in this one. They have the same manager, but I don't really think that's going to be too much of a problem. I think that these two will end up fighting. Cejudo deserves a shot. Even though he's a flyweight, even though he's never fought at bantamweight, they were going to do the rematch with TJ. The UFC was set on that. They were probably going to do it at bantamweight, and he just knocked out the bantamweight champion in 30 seconds. How are you going to deny him the title shot at bantamweight? So it's going to be most likely Marlon Moraes versus Henry Cejudo for the title. It's going to be a hell of a fucking fight. I can't wait for that. And we'll talk about that at a later date, predicting how that matchup's going to be going down. But that's going to be all for today. We analyzed and predicted all 12 fights on the UFC Nashville card going down this Saturday night at 5 p.m. Eastern on ESPN+. And we also recapped the UFC on London card that happened this past week, and also talking about a few big stories coming out of the week. The Conor McGregor arrest, the Tony Ferguson restraining order, a couple fights that were announced, and of course the big drug test failure of bantamweight champion TJ Dillashaw forfeiting his bantamweight championship. That's big time news. So that's going to be all for the podcast. This has been the 8th Martian MMA episode in a row. We are coming back next week for UFC Philadelphia, concluding the 9-week stretch of UFC events. But that is going to conclude episode 54 of Martian MMA. Thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy the fights this weekend.